Hello students, this is the beginning of the Stats Probability Unit review. We're going to cover the vocabulary right now. And if you guys can take a look on your paper, you will see that you've got a number of questions with blank lines, and then there is a word bank right below that you can actually make sure that you're using all of the words. Every one of them will be used one time in the different questions. So let's take a look at the vocab. Okay, question number 1. Blank data can be represented with numbers. Excuse me, class. And you can see the second question, blank data is not represented by with numbers. So there are two sets of data, or types of data we talked about in the beginning of this unit. There is categorical and quantitative. The way you're going to remember this is quantity means a number or a count. So quantity or quantitative can be represented by numbers. Quantitative. And that means categorical is the type of data that is not represented by numbers. Categorical. If I can get this written well. And if we take a look at our word bank and go and cross those off. Quantitative and categorical. Alright, let's continue. Remember categorical as well as like types of fruit, colors in a rainbow, different things like that, where you're going to use words to express the data instead of numbers. Alright, the next one, blank is the chance an event will occur. Well, this is just probability. We have learned that is a definition of probability. If you're going to try to predict whether something's going to occur or calculate whether something's going to occur, that is the job of people who do probability. So probability is the chance an event will occur. Let's find probability. There it is. Cross it off. Okay, you cannot have a probability more than blank percent. We've talked about this in class. 100% is all you can get. That covers every possible outcome of an experiment. You can't get more than 100%. And the next question is tied to that as well. If you add the decimal probabilities of all outcomes, they will equal 1. You could also say 1.0, 1.00. So the decimal probabilities add up to 1. The percent of all possible outcomes of an experiment are 100%. All right, let's take a look at that. I think there's two numbers in our answer key. Yes, there are. Here is 1 and here is 100. Alright. So far, so good. Pretty easy. Okay, if the chance of something happening is X%, then the chance of it not happening. So we look at this word not happening. If you think about this class, if something happening is X, then not happening is everything but X. And that is called a complement. One of the things we talked about is if the chance of something happening is X%, then you would take 1 minus that value to find its complement, which again is everything else but the event that we're looking for. So that is a complement. Alright, question, or the next one. This means A or an, so we don't know if it starts with a vowel or a consonant. A blank event is an event that is not influenced by a previous event. Well, if two events are going to happen in a row and the first one does not influence the second one, then we know they are independent. So an independent event. And the next one is a blank event is an event that is influenced by the outcome of the previous event. So now you're doing something like you are picking a card out of a deck and you're not putting it back in. That means the second event, the probability of the second event happening is influenced by the first event. And those two events depend on each other and they are dependent. Okay, let's take a look at the bottom here. Let's cross off those numbers. We've got the words, those dependent and independent. Oh, we also covered complement. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, got it. Next one. A predicted probability found before doing an experiment is called a blank probability. And the next one is tied to this. The probability that actually happens when we do an experiment is called this. Well, remember class, doing an experiment is based on experience, that is experimental. So we have to do an experiment to actually get this probability, because we're looking at what actually happens. And when you predict a probability, you're using math before you do the experiment, and that is theoretical. Theoretical probability. So I can see my word bank down here. We can get rid of theoretical. We can get rid of experimental. Alright, let's continue. Two events that cannot happen at the same time are referred to as blank events. So think about this. It's kind of like rolling a die and saying, what's the probability of it landing on 6 and 5? They can't happen together. Or spinning a spinner, what's the probability of landing on 2 and 3? It can't happen if you spin it one time. And we talked about these as being mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive. Exclusive meaning you're committed to one thing only, so it can only be committed to one of those two events. It can't be both at the same time. Can't flip a coin and say, what's the probability of it landing on heads and tails? Those are mutually exclusive events. They cannot happen at exactly the same time. All right. Two events that have some outcomes which fit into more than one category. So two events that have some outcomes which fit into more than one category. Actually, you know what? I'm going to say that we should change this to, let's see. No, that's correct. Two events that have some outcomes which fit into more than one category. Underline that. More than one category. If you think about this class, we've talked about this before. We've seen tables where you had, let's say, juniors, seniors on the top, and maybe their GPA or their preference of cereal or color or a movie type. And if you look at a row and a column of a two-way table, there's going to be overlap between those two things. And that overlap here between that row and that column is going to mean that you're double counting those, and you have to remove one of those groups. So this is known as overlapping events. Not only can you get one thing and you can get another thing, but you could also get the overlap of the two, because some outcomes fit into both of the categories. So there's overlapping. Let's get rid of mutually exclusive and overlapping here. Here's mutually exclusive, and here is overlapping. All right. Now the next three questions are all about relative frequencies. Can we tell the difference between the three of them? Blank relative frequency is found by dividing a row or column total by the grand total. Okay, row or column total. Remember, the row total and the column total are at the edges or the margins of the table, so that is marginal. Blank relative frequency is found by dividing a frequency that is not in a row or column total by the grand total. That means it's one of the numbers that are inside the table, which means they have they're included in both a row and a column, and that is joining a row and a column together, so it is joint relative frequency. And then the last one, a blank relative frequency is found by dividing a frequency that is not in a row or column total by the total for that row or column. This is where we use the word assume or if or of or given. This is conditional. Conditional meaning you pick a row or column first, and then you look just in that row or column. There's our condition that has to be true before we do our relative frequency. Alright, last two, I'll cross those off in a moment. Last two. Blank means how often an item occurs in a set of categorical data. Okay, so this is how often something occurs or how many times it happens, and we've learned that that means frequency, or that the word that describes that is the frequency of something happening. And then blank is the frequency of a category divided by the total of all frequencies. So one category divided by the total of all frequencies, and we've learned this is relative frequency. So you get a frequency table, and then if I ask you what the relative frequencies are, you just take every square or every category, every spot in that table, and you divide it by the total, and you get a decimal answer or a percent answer, and that's your relative frequency. So let's see if we've taken care of everything. We did relative frequency, we did conditional, joint, marginal, and we just also did frequency. So that covers all of the vocabulary words.